Good morning. That music is so dramatic that I worry that you expect a character from a Marvel movie to appear in front of you, a kind of super moderator or something like that to start the day, and can only be disappointed that it's just me. Fortunately, we do have some excellent speakers to begin your day, and congratulations, by the way, for getting here relatively bright and early, and I know you've all been doing other things as well. This particular session, which doesn't have a question and answer attached to it, is where three speakers get to tell you essentially what they're doing that's new. And it's an invitation to you, after you've heard them speak later in the day, to find them or the organisations associated with them to follow up on those aspects that you want to. Please feel absolutely free to do that later in the day. I know that you will anyway. The three speakers that we have are Phil Beattie, who is Chief Global Affairs Officer at the Times Higher Education Supplement, who, as we know from now on, are going to be greatly associated with this event, which is very, very welcome. So Phil will be first. And then Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who was an education minister as far back as 2007, which I find remarkable, really, but nevertheless that's true, but now is the founder and CEO of Human Capital Africa. And Luis Benveniste, who we've met before already, who is the Global Director of Education at the World Bank, and they'll each speak for a few minutes and so on. So Phil, can I invite you first to take the podium?
Thank you very much indeed, David. So there's a sense, I think, in higher education that we are facing a reckoning. This was an idea that was put forward by Fernando Reimers from Harvard University as part of the UNESCO International Commission on the Futures of Higher Education. He said in recent decades, the public and politicians are increasingly asking, what good do universities do for society? Who do universities serve? It's a debate that's raging, I think, in the US, in the UK as well, in Australia and parts of the world, but actually we're seeing it more and more. What is the good of universities? What are they doing? There's debates about return on investment, there's debates about cost and access. So Fernando said, he thinks it's causing a reckoning within the higher education community of comparable significance to the reckoning that led to the last major transformation of the university after the Second World War. That was, of course, a massive expansion of participation. So there's now a point of reckoning for global higher education. And Dame Nancy Rothwell from Manchester University has articulated this sense that universities need to rediscover their public good. Universities are here to address the big questions and challenges facing the world. And she said there's no better framework than the Sustainable Development Goals. Universities exist for public benefit. They need to demonstrate the public benefit, and the framework of the SDGs provides a really excellent opportunity to demonstrate impact and public good. So Times Higher Education in 2019 developed a really interesting new way of ranking universities. We produce the traditional research rankings, which tend to favor the global north, the elite schools with billion-dollar endowments. But this is a different ranking. We're ranking how are universities driving forward the SDGs, each and every one of the SDGs. We look at their research, their creation of new knowledge, the creation of innovation and ideas that will drive forward cures for disease, for example. How do we eradicate poverty? How do we offer food security through agricultural reform? We look at stewardship. How do they manage their own people? Are they promoting sufficient women and girls into educational opportunities, into senior leadership positions? Are they procuring their energy well? Are they managing waste? We look at outreach. Are they partnering with governments? Are they working with industry to drive forward the SDG agenda? And of course, an event like this, we're looking at teaching, the creation of the next generation of sustainable citizens, the next generation of skilled individuals who will fuel a green economy. So it's a really fascinating framework that allows us to hold universities to account for what they do to drive the SDGs. The thing I love about this ranking is the diversity. The traditional rankings, it's US, UK, the Western world, the global north. This is a ranking that says at the top of individual SDGs, you've got African universities, you've got Johannesburg ranked #1 in the world for challenging poverty, you've got KNUST in Ghana, leading on quality education, providing lifelong learning and opportunities for young people. You've got a huge diversity. Southeast Asian universities, world #1 for individual SDGs. So we're showing a diversity of excellence in the world that's not just about the traditional global north or the traditional universities in North America. So we're seeing excellence across a diverse range of countries. It's really revolutionary in that sense. But what our data has shown us, actually, when we look at things like the outreach elements, we find there's still a disconnect between what universities are doing to drive the agenda and the governments who are responsible for a sustainable future. We need to find new ways to connect the university resources with government priorities. We need to ensure governments are leveraging their universities. So we did some data analysis, the role of higher education in advancing the SDGs at the G20. And we did find quite a worrying gap between the universities and governments in terms of sharing the agenda, collaborating, exploiting the resources that universities have to help this agenda. And you can see there some commentary from the World Economic Forum and, of course, our own analysis. One of the issues was there's a really uneven distribution of research. This looks at the research volumes, publications against each individual SDG from Elsevier. And you can see there's a massive amount of research into global health. Of course there is, that's important. But the world is neglecting key areas of SDGs. Very little research comparatively into poverty, into food security, for example. Very limited research into life and land, life underwater. So one of the issues we had discovered is we need to sort of rethink the distribution of research into the SDGs, and governments need to leverage that. So we came up with 3 key ideas where universities and governments can partner more clearly. One is this targeting of research. I think universities would like to see more incentives. They have academic freedom in many countries, they have institutional autonomy, but we need to pull the levers to try and ensure that the universities are delivering on the SDG agenda, they're delivering on sustainability across all of the goals, and they're all interrelated. So funding incentives, funding schemes, top-down leverage, partnerships for the goals. The universities are in a wonderfully unique position, actually, to transcend some of the geopolitical challenges. They transcend borders, they share their results and share their knowledge across borders in a really unique way. So we actually think that they are the perfect bridge between nations to make sure that knowledge is properly shared, that universities become the conduits of knowledge. And that means, I think, governments, of course, supporting transnational education, supporting mobility programs, supporting research collaboration, but also freeing up universities to keep open links and collaborations across those often raising borders. We need to try and make sure we allow them that freedom. And then, of course, evidence-based policy. We were just talking earlier. There is a tendency in government sometimes to have a policy and look for the evidence to justify the policy. I'm sure this room is, of course, the exception to the rule. But we want to make sure those universities are there to show, to take their role of speaking truth to power. Universities are there to hold people to account, to speak truth to power, but also to provide the evidence base to help us understand the severity of the challenges, but also, I think, to provide the optimism that we do have solutions to the challenges. There's a huge wave of cautious optimism that we can tackle this huge existential problems that we face, for example, with the climate emergency, through technological change, through education, through skills. So letting those universities drive the evidence base to help us deliver the SDGs. And I just wanted to end on a final point around case studies. Times Higher Education is working with governments around the world to try and leverage this data to provide policy support. The data is great for marketing, to celebrate the success of universities, to show the strength of universities, to encourage partnerships, to attract talent and students. The rankings are fantastic in that way. But we want to make sure the data is used to sort of really become a matchmaking tool, a policy driving tool, so universities and governments can collaborate on understanding gaps, managing challenges. So we have a wonderful project with Mahesi, the Ministry for Higher Education, Research and Innovation in Thailand. First of all, we're mapping their university's contribution to SDGs against regional economic needs. So we can actually look at universities that are driving the economic agenda, economic growth, life underwater, for example, in the coastal areas. But we also have carried out a skills audit of students. We're surveying Thai students in collaboration with the Thai government to understand, are they getting the skills they need? Are universities delivering them what they need to become sustainable leaders, to become sustainable citizens, and do they have the skills and the attributes to make sure they're delivering a better future for everybody? So that's just one example of good practice, and I'm sure there are many, many more examples in this room, and we'd love to collaborate with you to keep driving the sustainability agenda, to harness the power of universities. So thank you very much indeed for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Phil, can I just check that you'll be around for people to talk to for a bit?
Absolutely. I'm here for the rest of the event. My colleagues, Nick over there, we have a stand. We're delighted to collaborate with anyone in this room. We're really keen to push this agenda, so thank you.
Thanks very much, Phil. Dr. Ezekwesili.
Thank you. It really isn't great that I am following up on someone who's spoken about tertiary education, because I'll be speaking about foundational learning. And I speak about this from the perspective of most of the world still being quiet at a piece of data that I believe should have outraged all of us. That piece of data is that we have a learning crisis. We have learning crisis because globally, I think 7 out of every 10 children are not achieving minimum proficiency level in foundational learning. Foundational learning, more broadly defined these days as literacy skills, numeracy skills, emotional skills that children should acquire by the time they're in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and ready to move on to other levels in their education. So we at the Human Capital Africa are getting everyone to be as outraged as we are, because foundational learning is the building block of all educational reforms. I was a minister of education in my country, Nigeria, and then I was vice president of the World Bank, responsible for the Africa region, and I could see clearly that it was not just a problem of lack of economic growth on a sustained level. It was also the problem of us not prioritizing human capital as the important and critical vehicle for human progress. And so natural resources, of which at least about 2/3 of the continent has one or the other of it, was taking the place of human capital in the higher order of emphasis. Now, when this data that I talk about came out, it really was a policy moment for me and for a lot of people. So foundational learning is the building block of all educational reforms. It is what you can use in predicting the future academic success or the lack of it, as well as whether the broader economic development goals of a country will be achieved. If we don't correct the problems with foundational learning, especially on our continent, and I show you the data of our continent, 9 out of every 10. That is terrible. So it's not a case of children are out of school, but that children who are in school are not achieving minimum proficiency level in larger numbers than we thought. Now, I have this very strong affinity with this mantra. In God we trust, but every other person must come with their data. Now, look at this data. This data should upset all of us into action. I don't like anger that does not result in effort to correct the situation. When I get angry, I do something. When I saw this data, I was angered. I'm a retired person. I don't do jobs. I have retired from corporate work. But when I saw this data, I knew I had to focus and get the continent's attention on solving it. And so this is the data that led us to establishing this organization, Human Capital Africa. Our vision is to ensure that all boys and girls in sub-Saharan Africa have the necessary education and the tools that they require for productive life, for life that is meaningful. And you know that we're the youthful continent, an average age of 19.7 years. That's incredible. By the year 2050, 1 out of every of the world's global workforce would be an African young person. So it means that we can't sleep on this. Our mission is to use evidence-based advocacy to mobilize governments and policymakers to take actions that improve early learning. Now, our work is divided along 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is to create awareness, increase the awareness of the problem. You can't own a problem that you have not known is severe and serious. And so data is there, but if people are not even aware of the existence and the meaning of the data, then you go nowhere. So create awareness, increase awareness among the countries and the leaders, and in order that they know the need to act and what to work on in order to improve the learning outcomes of their children. And then number 2 is to enable action and adoption of increased commitment among the country leaders that they want to improve FL Learn outcomes. This is demonstrated by their willingness to accept evidence to action that have worked. There are interventions that have solved this problem and solved them at scale. I don't know whether there is a Brazil delegation here, but that's a country that I know quite well. I serve on the board of one of their major institutions. Sobral is a unit of Brazil. It's been solving this problem through the kinds of intervention it's done. These are there. Kenya, Zambia, Ghana, at different levels, have some things that they are doing to solve this problem, a problem that can be solved. And we point countries toward the solutions. Then drive accountability. It is important that there will be mutual accountability between the countries and the development partners that support them, and all other actors in education. Ensuring this accountability at regional, global, and national levels, and even district levels, very important. And for us, we essentially want people to acknowledge, to commit, and agree to work on the problem. We want visibility as well as evidence and data so that things can be done with empirical and analytical grounding of how this problem can really quickly be solved. Effective implementation of what works, because there are often barriers to implementation. And so we sort of help them to deploy what actually works quickly and to do it at scale. It's not enough that a few children now begin to improve their learning. We want massive number of children to improve their learning. Collaboration and partnerships are key for us, utilizing resources, organizations, and practitioners at their complete disposal. So we're available to support, to hold the hands of the governments. This is just a dashboard to show you one of the things that we've done, which is there is a foundational learning ministerial coalition to which at least a half a dozen African ministers have become part of. It was created by ourselves and ADEA, which is the African Development Education Association for Development of Education in Africa. This has all the information that you need. You can pick it up. And then we do have a toolkit. Our toolkit is called the Human Capital Scorecard. The Human Capital Scorecard looks at macro learning issues and then looks at micro learning issues that really point to what it is that is not adequate in children who have been promoted to go on to other classes when they, frankly, don't have the foundation on which to build the rest of knowledge. And then we have the adoption tracker part of it. We have 2 key countries, Uganda and Malawi especially, that are implementing the approach of the scorecard as a way of arming themselves with the tools that measure and at the micro level and can correct the things that show up. And you would see the indicators that they measure. And then we do a two-part strategy for the year of education for the continent. And we really are so focused on the continent solving its problem. One of the ministers in an earlier session that we had this morning said it. Africa's problem will be solved by Africans. And what the Human Capital Africa does is to put everybody's feet to the fire. We've had fantastic lives. The children deserve even more fantastic lives. Everything that the policymaker or the political leader represents must be about creating a better future for the generation that comes behind us. And that, I hope, is what resonates with every one of you. There are many more things to this slide. You can pick them up. Structured pedagogy, teaching at the right level. Foundational learning.
Thank you, Dr. Ezekwesili. And are you around for the rest of the day?
I will be.
Yeah, okay, so there's a standing invitation as well. Luis, you're our final speaker.
Thanks very much. I'm really happy to be here to talk about a new line of research that the World Bank has been starting out within the education family, and which is about climate. So climate change is perhaps the defining challenge of our times. It may push over 100 million people into poverty by 2030, and yet climate action remains disappointingly low. Why is this? At least in part of the reason is the lack of information and skills. Lack of information about how severe the climate crisis is, but also information about what to do, how to act. So climate action is also slow because people don't have the necessary skills to propel green transitions. So the solutions to these problems lie with education sector, we want to argue. And yet, the education sector also has remained overlooked in climate policies. While climate-related official development assistance increased from 21% in 2013 to 34% in 2020, education made up less than 1.3% of this change. And this, we argue, is a problem because without education, we are not putting people at the center of climate action. At the same time, the effects of climate change are threatening progress in improving education outcomes. Extreme temperatures and climate events are eroding hard-won gains, and systems must adapt to become more resilient and continue to make progress on learning for all. So we are putting together a forthcoming report on learning to propel climate action that presents data, evidence, operational examples, and a policy agenda on how governments can harness education and learning to propel climate action. It emphasizes 3 areas of action. First, how school education for pro-climate behavior change at scale. Second, to harness upper secondary and tertiary education for green skilling and innovation. And finally, how to protect education systems by making them more adaptable, more resilient for us, in the case of climate events. So let me just take a few minutes to discuss some of the climate behavior change. Globally, education attainment is the single strongest predictor of climate change awareness. Even as early as elementary school, exposure to environmentally related curriculum-based education can reduce energy consumption by more than 15% in their homes and 30% in their schools. And this education can propel behavior change today, not just tomorrow. This is because children's influence on their parents and their communities. How many times has your kid pestered you about to recycle more or to buy an electric vehicle? In India, climate-related outreach to children not only increased their pro-climate behavior, but also increased the pro-climate behavior of their parents by nearly 13%. Parents are much more receptive to climate messaging when it's done with their children or through their children. Education helps individuals more adaptive to the impacts of climate change via increased employability and incomes. Globally, every year of learning generates about a 10% increase in earnings annually. And across Brazil, Cuba, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Haiti, Mali, Senegal, Thailand, People with higher levels of education exhibit greater disaster preparedness and response. Our schools also can do so much more for fostering pro-climate behavior change and climate action. Across low and middle-income countries, most students, parents, teachers, and even policymakers want schools to better prepare students for climate action, but this is currently not happening due to foundational skills, lack of climate education within already overloaded curricula, and lack of teacher capacity. But this agenda needs to be managed very carefully to ensure that climate topics do not crowd out the focus on foundational learning, as Aubrey just presented. Instead, we can do much more to bolster foundational learning using climate topics. Education is the only way to develop the skills required for green transitions, especially green transitions that are also just. A global green transition is underway, not just in developing economies, but also not in the developed economies, but also in the developing countries. This shift is environmentally sustainable and to foster economic growth that needs skilled workers. Although green skills are central to the green transitions that most countries have pledged, their characteristics are not well understood. There is a misperception that green skills are highly technical, highly specific to few sectors, energy, construction, transport, and only achievable through demanding degrees. This is not true. Novel analysis for this report shows the green facts for about green skills. Green skills are broad and include non-technical skills, social-emotional skills, cross-sectoral skills, and skills that are achievable through short courses. Green skills can be flexibly applied and include a core of transferable cognitive and social-emotional skills. These skills are not just for new jobs, they are augmented skills for existing jobs. These skills are evolving in a way that is unpredictable and inequitable. Education can also do much more on green skilling and innovation. Ensuring a smooth and just green transition will require a wide diversity of skills and an adaptive workforce. Systems can foster this by emphasizing strong foundations, providing flexible pathways to skilling, and ensure smoother information flows between the private sector, education systems, and students. And at the same time, education is under threat from climate change. Climate-related severe weather events cause school closures, disrupting learning. 10-year-olds in 2024 will experience twice as many wildfires and tropical cyclones, 3 times more river floods, 4 times more crop failures, and 5 times more droughts over their lifetime in a 3 centigrades global warming pathway than a 10-year-old in 1966. So rising temperatures also cause learning losses, even when schools are open. Global evidence suggests that temperatures that are very high or deviate significantly from local trends precipitate setbacks to learning. Heat-related learning losses may appear unremarkable when looking at changes in average temperatures over time. However, our forthcoming analysis shows that even the small learning impacts of slowly increasing temperatures could amount to significant cumulative losses over time, especially for those in hotter regions. So a good example of this is Brazil. Students in the hottest 10% of Brazilian municipalities lost about 1% of learning per year due to increasing heat exposure. And if this learning loss accumulates over time, this could mean that an average student could lose between 2/3 and 1.5 years of learning due to rising temperatures. So together, these effects will lead to a significant learning loss if there is no remediation, which will in turn significant income losses, lower productivity, and greater inequality. So governments can better adapt education systems to a changing climate. Governments can enhance the resilience of their education systems now by focusing on education management for resilience, school infrastructure for resilience, ensuring learning continuity in the face of climate shocks, and leveraging students and teachers as change agents. So we have a policy note on adapting education for climate change that is out already, and I'll happy to share with those the link after the session. Our global report is titled Learning to Propel Climate Action. It has tons of new data, new evidence, new analysis, and will be around September. And I look forward to engaging with you all on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much to the entire panel for sharing what you've shared with us. And everybody, they're very much available for the rest of the day to talk to. Thank you very much indeed.